It was late, close to midnight, and Halloween had almost fully bled out of the night. The neighborhood, once alive with the sound of laughter, shuffling footsteps, and the rustle of candy bags, had gone completely still. Hours earlier, the streets had been dotted with kids in masks and face paint, parents walking alongside them with flashlights, and the occasional startled scream from someone spooked by a cheap jump scare. But now the streets were empty. Even the faint echoes of trick-or-treating were gone, swallowed by a cold, hollow quiet. Across the street, the neighbors who had been blasting one of those ridiculous Halloween soundtracks earlier, the kind filled with fake creaking doors, chains rattling, and witchy cackles, had turned everything off. Their house was dark now, the front porch bare except for a sagging jack-o'-lantern whose candle had burned out, leaving its carved grin as nothing more than a shadow on its own skin. Inside my house, the atmosphere felt heavy. I was sitting in the living room with my cousin Q. The glow from the television washed the walls in shifting colors, but the rest of the room stayed in shadow. Neither of us was really paying attention to what was on TV. The kind of late night quiet had settled in where even a whisper feels too loud. My younger cousin, only 4 years old, had been with us earlier but had gone to bed hours ago. She'd been running around in a little witch costume, her favorite doll clutched in her hand all evening. When she got too tired to keep playing, she'd drop the doll on the living room rug before shuffling down the hall to her room. It wasn't an ordinary toy. It was one of those porcelain dolls with a fragile painted face, glassy eyes that catch the light in strange ways, and a faded dress with lace frills. I'd always found it unsettling, even in daylight, something about the way its lips were painted in a half-smile that didn't seem friendly, and how no matter where you stood, its eyes seemed to follow you. When Q got up to get a glass of water, she passed by the hallway. I noticed her hesitate for a split second. She came back holding the glass, but she didn't sit right away. Instead, she looked at me and said, "Weird question, but do we have a cat?" I shook my head. "No, why?" She frowned slightly, glancing back toward the hall. I thought I saw something, small, low to the ground, moving fast. I tried to laugh it off. "Probably just your shadow or something." "Maybe," she said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. It moved kind of weird, like it was crawling. We left it at that and tried to focus on the TV, but a few minutes later I heard it too, a faint, irregular tapping sound, like something small stepping lightly on the wooden floor. At first I thought maybe Q was shifting her feet, but when I glanced over, she was sitting completely still, eyes wide. The tapping stopped, silence pressed in, then came a slow, dragging noise, something scraping across the floorboards just out of sight. I muted the television without saying a word, and instantly the noise stopped. We stared at the hallway, the shadows stretching toward us like dark fingers. My heart was beating harder than I wanted to admit. That's when Q's face changed. Her eyes locked on something just over my shoulder. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak. I turned my head slowly. The doll was sitting in the middle of the hallway. Upright, perfectly balanced, facing us. It had been on the rug earlier, I was sure of it. Nobody had gotten up to move it. The hallway light was off, but the doll's pale face seemed to almost glow in the dimness, the gleam in its glass eyes catching what little light there was. A strange stillness settled over us. We didn't get up, didn't approach it. Q whispered, "That's creepy." I forced a chuckle I didn't feel and turned back to the TV, pretending we hadn't just seen something impossible. But I couldn't focus. I kept catching myself glancing toward the hallway. The doll didn't move again for a while. Then the lights flickered, just for a second, but long enough to notice. When they came back on, the scraping sound returned. Louder now, closer. I turned my head. The doll wasn't in the hallway anymore. I didn't say a word, neither did Q. We just sat frozen, eyes darting around the dim corners of the room, every muscle in my body tight with the instinct to run, but my feet refusing to move. Somewhere in the house, maybe from the kitchen, maybe from right behind the couch, there was the faintest patter of tiny footsteps. We didn't sleep much that night. When I finally drifted off in my room, I dreamt of those footsteps pacing outside my door. In the morning, the doll was lying face down in the hallway again. Nobody claimed to have touched it. For the next few days, I tried to pretend the whole thing had been some bizarre coincidence. Maybe Q had moved the doll as a joke and didn't want to admit it. Maybe I was tired and imagined hearing those little footsteps. That's what I told myself, but late at night, when the house got quiet and the hum of the fridge was the loudest thing in the room, I'd find my mind drifting back to that pale porcelain face in the hallway. The strangest part was how the doll seemed to keep showing up where it didn't belong. On Monday, I found it propped up on the couch, as if someone had been sitting it there to watch TV. Nobody owned up to putting it there. On Wednesday, I found it in the bathroom sink, water dripping slowly from the faucet onto its frilly dress, dampening the lace. That night, I stuffed it in a shoebox, taped it shut, and shoved it into the back of the hall closet. The next morning, the shoebox was on the kitchen counter, empty. I didn't say a word to anyone. I just put the doll back in my younger cousin's room where it belonged and avoided looking at it whenever I passed her door. Life went on. Q eventually went back to her place and the weirdness seemed to fade. For a while, it felt like things were normal again until I met her. She wasn't like anyone I'd met before. Quiet but magnetic, the kind of person who made you feel like you'd known her for years, even though you'd just spoken for the first time. I ran into her at a small coffee shop on a rainy evening. She noticed the book I was reading and made a comment about it, and somehow that turned into an hour-long conversation. From then on, we started meeting up often. She'd text me out of the blue, always knowing when I was free. It didn't seem strange at first. She was funny, interesting, and made me feel seen. But she also had a strange way of turning up exactly when I didn't expect her. If I went for a walk late at night, I'd see her standing on the opposite side of the street, smiling faintly before crossing over to join me. If I stopped by the corner store, she'd appear in the next aisle as though she'd been there all along. Once, I asked her how she always knew where I was. She just smiled and said, "I always know." There was something about the way she said it, soft, almost loving, but it sent a cold shiver down my spine. One stormy night, she called and asked if she could come over. She said she didn't want to be alone with the thunder. I let her stay. We sat up talking for hours until the rain softened and my eyes grew heavy. I offered her the couch, but when I woke up in the middle of the night, she wasn't there. She was sitting at the edge of my bed, in the dark, staring at me. I asked her what she was doing. She answered in that same calm tone, "I'm making sure nothing bad happens to you." It should have felt comforting, but instead, I felt pinned in place by her gaze, like she wasn't guarding me from something outside, but from something inside. After that, she started visiting less often. Weeks passed without seeing her. I began to wonder if I'd done something to drive her away, but there was also a strange relief in her absence, until the night I woke up at 3:17 a.m. The room was dark, except for a faint glow from the streetlight outside my window. My eyes adjusted slowly, and that's when I saw it. A silhouette in the corner of the room, still watching. I didn't move. My pulse roared in my ears. The shape didn't vanish when I blinked. It stayed there, silent. I thought of calling out her name, but something deep inside told me not to. I just lay there, pretending to be asleep, until the shadow was gone. In the morning, I checked the corner. Nothing. No signs anyone had been there. Except, sitting on the floor where the shadow had stood was the doll. I didn't touch the doll. I just stood there, staring at it in the gray light of early morning, trying to figure out how it had gotten there. My cousin hadn't visited in weeks, and I'd locked my bedroom door before sleeping. The windows were shut. There was no way anyone could have come in without me hearing, but the doll was there, its head tilted slightly to the side, like it was studying me. I took it straight to the garage, grabbed an old shoebox, and shoved it inside again. This time, I didn't just tape it shut. I wrapped it in duct tape, layer after layer, until the box looked like a solid silver block. Then I climbed up the ladder to the attic and left it in the farthest, dustiest corner I could reach. That night, I triple-checked every lock in the house before going to bed. I left the hallway light on. Still, sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint rattle of the wind against the windows had my eyes snapping open. Somewhere after 2 a.m., I finally drifted off. I woke to a sound. Soft, rhythmic, a faint thump, drag, thump, drag. It was coming from inside my room. I froze. My first thought was that I was dreaming, that my brain was replaying the sound from that night on Halloween. But then I felt it. An almost imperceptible vibration through the mattress, like the floor beneath me was shifting under tiny, deliberate movements. My eyes adjusted to the dark. At the foot of my bed stood a figure. It wasn't her, at least not the way I remembered her. The shape was small, child-sized. In the dim glow from the hallway light spilling under my door, I saw pale porcelain skin and glints of glass eyes. The doll, it was standing, my breath caught. I couldn't move, I couldn't think. Then slowly the doll tilted its head, too far the way no living neck should bend, and I heard a faint giggle, but it wasn't coming from the doll's painted mouth. It was coming from the corner. I turned my head, and she was there. The girl I'd met at the coffee shop, the one who always knew where I was. She was standing in the same place I'd seen the shadow before. Only now she wasn't smiling. Her expression was blank, eyes dark and unblinking. "I told you I'd make sure nothing bad happens to you," she whispered. The doll took a single, deliberate step toward me. I scrambled backward, hitting the headboard. My hand groped blindly for the lamp, knocking it over instead. The room went pitch black. Something touched my ankle. Small fingers, cold and impossibly strong. I kicked out, felt nothing, but the sound of that faint giggle echoed again, closer now, as though it was right beside my ear. "Don't fight it," her voice murmured. "She just wants to be with you." I couldn't tell if she meant herself or the doll. The air grew heavier, harder to breathe. The room smelled faintly of old perfume and something musty, like the inside of the attic. My head spun. I thought I was going to pass out. Then everything went silent. When I came to, it was morning. The room looked normal. The doll was gone. So was she. For the next several nights, nothing happened. I convinced myself it was over, that maybe I'd hallucinated everything out of exhaustion. But the sense of being watched never left. I'd catch movement in the corner of my vision, hear faint tapping sounds from the hall when I was alone, smell that same old perfume lingering in rooms I hadn't entered all day. One night, unable to sleep, I went for a walk. It was cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. As I passed the darkened houses on my street, I caught sight of a figure across the road. She was standing there, still as a statue, watching me. Something about her face was different this time, sharper, less human, and in her arms, cradled like a child, was the doll. I froze on the sidewalk. The air around me seemed to tighten, each breath harder than the last. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, cradling the doll like it was the most precious thing in the world. The street was silent except for the faint buzz of a street lamp flickering overhead. I thought about running, but my legs felt rooted in place. Every instinct screamed that if I turned my back, I wouldn't make it home. She finally started walking toward me, slow, measured steps. The doll's porcelain head bobbed slightly in her arms, its eyes catching the dim light in a way that made them seem almost alive. "What do you want from me?" I called out, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. Her steps didn't quicken, but her smile returned. Soft, unsettling. "I told you before," she said, "to keep you safe, but she's grown fond of you. She doesn't want to let go." I glanced around. Not a single curtain twitched in any of the houses. No cars passed. The entire neighborhood felt abandoned, as if the world had narrowed to just the three of us. She stopped a few feet away. The doll's gaze locked on mine. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you saw her," she said simply. "Most people don't. They look right through her, but you noticed." The way she said it made my skin crawl, like it wasn't meant to be a compliment. Before I could respond, the doll's head turned by itself. It looked at me, lips frozen in that painted smile, and then I heard it, a voice, tiny, high, pitched, and impossibly close. "Stay." I stumbled back. "No," I said, my voice cracking. "You're not real. This isn't real." The girl stepped closer, holding the doll out toward me. "She can be real for you, forever." The moment her arms extended, I felt a sharp coldness seep into the air, a weight pressing down on my chest. The shadows around us seemed to stretch, creeping along the pavement toward my feet. Then the doll moved, not just its head. Its whole body twisted in a jerky, unnatural motion, like it was trying to climb out of her arms. I turned and ran. My lungs burned as I sprinted down the street, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. 2 sets, one light and quick, the other a slow, deliberate thump, drag. I didn't dare look back. I reached my front door, fumbling with the keys. Something brushed the back of my neck, cold and stiff. I shoved the door open and slammed it behind me, locking it twice. Silence. I stood there, panting, my ear pressed to the door. No footsteps, no voice. Just the sound of my own breathing. Hours passed before I felt safe enough to move. The first light of dawn spilled through the blinds, chasing away the shadows. I finally told myself it was over. I went to make coffee, trying to steady my hands, and that's when I saw it. Sitting on the kitchen table, the doll, its head tilted, glass eyes glinting in the pale morning light, and next to it, a folded piece of paper. In neat, careful handwriting, it read, "You don't have to run anymore. We're already inside."